Hey, thanks everyone for joining us on this February ARC monthly update. We have a little bit of a different format this month as Andrew is on the road, so he's calling in remote. Andrew, how you doing today?
Doing fantastic, Matt. Feel a little bit bad because I've got some gorgeous weather outside, and I know that everyone up in Cleveland and actually a lot of area of the country's been hit pretty hard. So feel a little bad, not too bad. So doing good today.
Well, good. We'll enjoy it. Hey, we do got some sun up here, and it's 45, which going from 5-degree weather, I'll
Ooh.
take this any day of the week.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
Nice, very nice.
So, hey, sticking with our Valentine's Day kind of theme of February, I actually went around the office and I asked everybody what they love about logistics. So first I want to cut to that video and let's check out a few of their answers.
What I love about logistics is the fact that we're able to move interesting freight all over the world, and I get to see a little bit of what people are moving around, ordering, and just have the knowledge of what is moved around the world. It's pretty cool.
What I love about logistics is this constant puzzle. You always have to solve a puzzle. There's different many variations at all times. That's what I love about it.
What I love about logistics is keeping my customer happy and working with other people all over the world.
Allows lobster to be brought to the dinner table.
Here you go. I love that everything, everywhere you go, was shipped at some point in time from somewhere. From clothes to everything you see in every room, everywhere you go. It's all connected somehow. And at one point in time, was either on a boat or in a truck at some given point in time. It's pretty amazing.
All right. Well, Andrew, let me pitch that question to you. What do you love about logistics?
Oh man, it's very simple for me. The one thing I love about logistics, the reason why I've been in it for 18 years plus, the reason why I see myself always being in it is the complexity of it, the ability to solve a problem. It's, every single day you come in and you think like, oh, no day is ever the same. And you could ask anybody, it doesn't matter where they sit in the spectrum of logistics, whether it's, the truckload or package or, a CEO or, an actual handler on the ground. It's always the same answer, at least in my mind. It's like, there's always a problem to solve, and there's always an opportunity to make a customer happy. So that's one of the reasons I absolutely love logistics and have loved it since I started, and the reason why I got into it, and ultimately the reason why I'll be in it for most likely the rest of my life. How about you, Matt?
Awesome. Yeah, I love the fact that every single thing is moved and shipped, and stuff comes from all over the world, and it's amazing when you actually start to learn how stuff gets here. Before I got in logistics, I just thought, hey, everything, I don't know, you just go to the store and there's a bunch of goods at the store. But actually, when you learn how things travel and move, it's fascinating. And the amount of different pieces and parts and agents that all come together to make that happen is really, really cool. So that's what I love about logistics.
Absolutely. Awesome. That's great. Great point. Yep.
All right, well, let's transition into a little bit of industry news. So we mentioned it, but really weather has been wreaking havoc on the U.S. and this last month of February. We've had millions without power. We've had flights canceled, passenger freight flights. We've had bridges closed, airports closed. I actually looked up Union Pacific on the rail. They reported that they had 400 locations without power. And really, I can't remember a year that it's been, we had a nationwide freeze like we did this last February.
Yeah, to the point that it affected the power grid so significantly as well. I've been spending time in the South, kind of like the South, and then I've been going west. I got two business things I'm kind of running between in terms of customers. And it was interesting. So I was in New Orleans going up to Phoenix, and during this whole transition, so everything comes through Dallas, and Dallas has had it really hard. Between Dallas and Houston has been hit really, really hard. And between flight cancellations, like you said, and all the other stuff that got changed, one of the most significant things, I think, like you said, is the fact that it's compounding the already difficult problem we're facing in terms of, shortage at the rail, in terms of capacity, the trucks, even to the point that the local grocery store, Whole Foods, they basically just had nothing on their shelves because everything comes through Dallas in New Orleans. Like their entire supply chain is really built off of that Texas corridor. So when you think about the spiderweb effect cold has, or something that this magnitude would have, it's significant because it damages the supply chains, not only people's lives, but obviously supply chains in a lot of other areas for a long, recurring time.
Yeah, it can really just throw an instant wrench into everything and really make the wheels stop, which is kind of scary, in a lot of ways. So, one of the takeaways we always talk about and tell our customers is you never know when bad weather is going to come. So you always kind of have to be prepared and be ready and really be paying attention to, like, if you have an important shipment or something that has to get there, and it's that time of year, just pay attention to the weather. A lot of times I know often we just kind of check the weather in our city and we don't always think about what's going on across the country. But if you got shipments that need to get places, it's an important thing to look out for.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting because we're becoming more and more dependent upon that kind of idea where, as a logistics team, weather is becoming very important to us. So as we look out over the weeks and months, knowing with the heat map in terms of where we're active most and what we have coming in and going out, we do have to look at that as a company. We do have to try to protect our clients if possible, especially during this time of the year. The Pacific Northwest gets decimated regularly in terms of the mountains getting snow and trying to get stuff up that way. So really, to your point, not only in terms of being prepared, but also as a logistics team, we have to be smart enough to go out to the customer and try to, at any point, kind of forewarn them, letting them know what we're seeing in terms of delays due to weather.
Yeah, that's a great point. Let's move over to our shipping insight this month. And, we talked about what we love in the beginning part of this video, and now we're going to talk about the thing most people actually hate in logistics.
Sure.
And it's damage. Yeah. It's the D word.
Damage, man.
Damage, yeah.
Yep.
So I wanted to ask you if you could give us a couple tips and pointers to shippers out there. How can we avoid damage? Is it inevitable? Are there things that we can do? What are some of the things we can do?
Yeah, so I think to your first point, there is an inevitability to it, right? Where, in most cases, unless it's an exclusive vehicle, you're picking goods up, they're going through cross docks there, in reality, and I'm sure everybody that's watching this, or the assumption would be that everybody understands how freight moves, but I'll give a quick understanding of it. You get freight picked up at a dock or facility, it goes to another dock where it's pulled off the truck, and then they try to consolidate it with freight that's like it going to another terminal. Usually that goes to that terminal, and then obviously it continues to consolidate as it gets closer and closer and closer and closer to that last mile, that last end destination. So really what ends up happening is you have these sort and segmentations of your freight, and that means tow motors are handling it, they're putting it into another area, they're loading it on a truck and that sort of thing. So what could happen is there is always an inevitability, because stuff is handled multiple times, that you could have damage, but the less damage you can find less damage by taking certain steps, take certain precautions to do that. So with that, one of the first things, and obviously this is kind of a no-brainer in some ways, but it's proper packaging. Knowing how I just explained how everything moves, understanding that forklifts, tow motors, warehouse handlers, these guys are coming in off the truck. They're unloading sometimes hundreds of trucks a night and reloading hundreds of trucks a night, and they're using machinery for it. Machinery that is made of iron, steel, and metal, and these guys are flying around to where even if something sometimes gets bumped, if your monitor gets bumped and it's not properly packaged, there's a good chance that you're going to find damage there, just because you're talking, plastic or glass and, versus metal. So properly packaging them is vitally important. And that's why when you get a box from a manufacturer, you're like, why do I have all this? Why do I have all this extra packing? What do I need all this for? Well, it's really to protect it in transit, whether it's packed tight, whether it's hard to get into, whether it's hard to open. All those things are requirements for them to properly pack these things in a way that makes sense to be to maintain safety for the product. So I think that the number one thing is proper packaging, and that comes down to not only the unit itself being properly packaged, but also the skid having proper protection around it, being properly banded so there's no shifting in transit, or in the case that you're shipping stuff that's unprotected, properly crated to make sure that it doesn't get damaged.
Yeah, that really is a great point, though, because I do think sometimes when we see it leave our dock, we think, it's out of sight, out of mind. But kind of going through what you just laid out and all those transfers can really help paint the picture of, and you don't really know how many times that's going to happen, right, with the shipment. I mean, it could happen once, it could happen 6 times. I mean, depending on the locations that you're shipping between, you know, and it's going to get touched a lot. So potentially. So
yeah, real quick, a good rule of thumb to look at is the further you travel. So the more miles you're trying to put on your freight, the more transfers you're going to have. Just as a general rule of thumb. I mean, there's areas where it breaks because you're going to a major metro area or something. But in general, the further you're traveling, the more times you're going to see sort and segs happen inside that ecosystem. So yeah, to your point, you have no idea how many times it's going to sort and seg unless you really know the network you're shipping on.
Yeah, and that actually segues right into our next point, which is to understand your service level. So, Andrew, explain this to us a little bit, but not all service levels are the same. As far as
no, not at all,
not at all.
So like I yeah, so I kind of alluded to it at the beginning. You know, in my last segment, you have different classifications of services, right? You have air freight, you have expedited, you have exclusive use. Exclusive use is going to obviously provide you with the most protection. And what exclusive use is you load that freight in the container or truck or whatever transit vessel you're using. You load it on the conveyance, and it's basically yours. Like, it should never be touched. In fact, those are the times where you can pop a seal on it, you know, in terms of a seal on the door to make sure nobody opens it or checks it. Those are the times you can do that because it's exclusive. You're paying for the entire use of that truck, the driver, all that sort of stuff. It's exclusive use. That's really, you know, you should be able to load that thing and it should never be touched. When you think about people who move across the country, think about that in the sense of its exclusive use. They load all their stuff in. It should have some level of seal on it to where if anybody was to open it up, when you receive it, you would see that that something happened, that somebody messed with it. And then after that, it starts to get into kind of all the other services. And if you look at air freight, you look at, you know, economy, you know, LTL, that sort of stuff, you start to understand that there is a big gap between something moving air freight and then something moving economy LTL. And then there's other areas where we have that ARC specialize in, which is this line haul, where basically we run trucks, but we run them on the schedules of an airline. So let me take a step back and explain that. When you have air freight, it goes from an airport, and usually it's handled by domestically anyway, because of the infrastructure we have domestically. We do a lot of work where guys are physically, you know, picking freight up, setting it on a belt to bring it in and out of an airline. Very rarely are they using any sort of equipment outside of just, you know, manpower due to the size of the actual doors and stuff on the airlines when you're looking at domestic freight. Now there are freighters where they do load with machinery, but a lot of it's loaded by hand. And what this means is you're not having that metal on metal, that metal machine smacking into your freight. So in the air freight world, there is usually a lot less damage because not only do you have, a human actually doing the physical lifting and putting down of your product, but you also have less transfers. Typically, you're only going to see one. At the most, you're going to see is two transfers on a typical piece of freight in the airlines, simply because they are more efficient. They cover more regionalized area, and they can travel further and faster. So in a typical air freight shipment, you're going to see less damage simply because they might only do one or two transfers. In kind of how ARC looks at things, very rarely will we ever do two transfers unless we're going out of the country. Domestically, we almost always will only ever do a max of one transfer, meaning your freight is only being touched at one relay terminal at most, and then going on to the destination. We always try to do it where it goes direct, but obviously we're subject to airline transit times and airline, transit maps. So putting that aside, when you look at parcel or you look at your FedExes, every single shipment that FedEx moves for the most part, and this is the rule. I mean, obviously there's exceptions based on their maps, but almost every single shipment will travel through Memphis, Tennessee. So if you're shipping from Cleveland, Ohio to Nashville, Tennessee, it doesn't go to Nashville. It actually goes Cleveland. They pick it up at their dock. They bring it back to their console in Cleveland. It then gets taken to the airport where it's loaded on the plane. That plane then flies down to Memphis where it gets sorted out. It gets segmented. It then gets put back on a plane that goes to Nashville, or they might truck that length of time, but they're going to consolidate it there in Memphis, bring it into Nashville, where it gets brought to the local facility, put on another truck, and then delivered. So in their case, they're always bringing everything into Memphis, even if it's wouldn't even make sense. Like you'd say, well, why won't you go right to Nashville? Well, they go through Memphis simply because that's their sort and seg hub. And most large organizations, large logistics companies have that sort of sort and seg model in there. So as you move down the chain, it's same thing with LTL. You're going to have these sort and seg segments where they pick up at the local facility. They've got their local facility where they consolidate on trucks that go to the next break bulk and the next break bulk as it gets closer and closer and closer to that last mile segment.
Yeah. And that makes sense. I think when you track a shipment, even with them, you always wonder sometimes, why is it going to Chicago when it should be going to Charlotte? Yeah. It's going the wrong direction. But one of the reasons that we wanted to talk about this too is because, when people look to ship, they might think, well, I have it packed really well or packaged really well. Let's just send it economy. But there is other risks involved with just sending economy. Again, if you are sending economy, it might be the cheapest route to go, but it might have the highest chance of damage. So it is something to understand, know your service level. If you have something that's, really fragile or just high value shipment, it might be a good idea to, pay for, I know it's more expensive, but pay for air freight or exclusive vehicle, like you were telling us, just to reduce the risk of damage. Because again, if you just want to do, okay, we'll just throw it on the cheapest rate, just the scenario you just laid out, it could be transferred, multiple times, increasing the risk of damage. So,
absolutely.
So let's talk about this too. I know you said it is inevitable in some ways in this industry. We've all seen it and faced it. What are some things that, you can do just basically if damage does occur?
Yeah. So recently in the last couple of years, the carriers have received more favorable rulings overall. So it used to be, damage, if there's a fork hole in your freight, it's very easy to see that when you receive it. So the number one thing to always remember is that when you receive freight, when your customer is receiving freight, whoever is actually doing the receiving, walk around the freight, mark down anything that may appear to have damage to it. Even if you're not sure there's actual damage, just mark it down. Scuffs on the side, fork hole. And all you have to do is write possible damage, and then on the bill that you're signing or on the electronic thing you're signing, you say, possible damage, fork hole, and then you sign your name. What this allows, the individual who then has to reconcile this to is have some footing to say, oh, no, we saw this when we received this freight. We didn't do this at our dock. This was done prior to us actually receiving the freight. Secondly, when you're receiving freight, open it up as soon as you possibly can. So a few years back, a ruling was laid out where concealed damage, this is damage that happens inside of it. So think about you get a TV monitor, you open it up, but the screen's cracked inside, but outside looks fine. Well, they dropped it. You used to have 90 days for concealed damage. 90 days. If you open up that box, 20 days after you receive it and it's broken inside, you can go back to the carrier. Well, there was a ruling, I want to say 2017, it actually came to, maybe a little bit earlier than that, I have to look it up, but basically they said you now have 5 days from receiving the goods, 5 days to actually report concealed damage. So if you don't do it in 5 days, the carrier has no obligation to actually do any sort of reconciliation. But then secondly, their insurance isn't going to cover it. What you have to think about in this world is not that the carrier is saying, no, I'm not going to pay the claim. It's that they have requirements from their insurance that they've purchased that are going to cause them to be able to say yes or no to claims based on the parameters set forth. So they got, some law was rewritten somewhere that basically protects them now due to damage claims past 5 days. Because if you'd imagine, right, something sits on your dock for 20 days, it gets moved around 4 or 5 times, somebody dumps it, they lift it back up, set it down, they open up and say, oh, it's damaged. And then they go back and try to claim it against the carrier who dropped that thing off a month ago or whatever.
Exactly.
The insurance was not liking that. So they pushed for a ruling that prevented it. So the number one thing, and I know it's long-winded, but the number one thing is walk around your freight. Number one, make sure that there's no appearance of damage. Make sure that it's securely done to the pallet in the way that it was shipped, and then pop it open as fast as you can. even if you're not going to use it, pop it open and take a look at it. If it's something that is susceptible to damage, just to make sure that there's no internal damage so that you can report it. One of the other things that's important to look at is the carrier and the release value of the carrier. Every carrier out there has some level of release value baked into their tariff. A lot of times what you'll see, though, is on the most economy freight or the most best rate, especially when you go through large 3PL buying groups, and there's a bunch out there where you can just go online basically and get a cheap rate. What they'll do and how they mess with their rates is they actually reduce the release value as part of a negotiation tactic to take down the per pound cost when you look at insurance. So if you're shipping copper wire has to have a certain release value because there's an inherent value to copper. So if you're trying to ship it, if it's worth $5 a pound, but your release value is 50 cents a pound, if it gets damaged, you will never recoup what the true cost per pound of copper is, simply because that's how the carrier does the release value. So it's important to make sure that when you negotiate those rates or when you're dealing with the carrier, those release values are included in terms of being effective, or are included in terms of in the contract with the tariff.
Okay, well, that is really, really good information to know. And I always tell people too, pictures always help with damage, right? If you got freight that you thought was
great
damaged,
point. Yeah.
Take pictures. It just proves that you were actually looking at something, and pictures speak 1,000 words, right?
Yep, absolutely. And there's going to be whatever carrier gets damaged on, they're going to have a claims process. You call up their claims department and get it going, and everybody's going to want pictures. Everybody's going to want pictures.
Yeah.
So you nailed it. Get pictures.
Good. All right. Well, there are a couple tips. Thank you, Andrew, for sharing on how to avoid damage if you're a shipper out there. And we're going to talk now a little bit about our ARC company culture. And one of the things I wanted to talk about today really quickly is ARC's SCS, our supply chain solutions. A lot of companies know that we ship freight, but they don't necessarily know about our supply chain solutions. Andrew, can you just give us a quick rundown on what is our SCS department and how we can help customers?
Yeah, so I mentioned one of the reasons I love logistics is problem solving, right? That's kind of been something that I've kind of found as a critical component to being an engaging industry to be in every single day. And really what ARC's SCS department is an extension of that. The best way to think of it as, it's not just a one-time, I got to move one piece to one location, but it's more of an encompassing idea if you're looking at it from a project standpoint, or from trying to institute a new way of doing business for your organization. And ARC wants to come alongside from the point of view in terms of logistics and say, what is the best way to do this? So a few examples are, you're going to be buying a new warehouse, or you want to expand to a new region. How does my supply chain get impacted, from sourcing to actually handling the freight to actually the final mile delivery? How do we change our organization to be better? Our supply chain solutions really focus on trying to solve those problems for you. Usually, there's sometimes a financial component to it where we're trying to save money. Most always, obviously, that's what everybody starts with. But where we see the most benefit to our clients is a better and well-run organization at the end of it. Our SCS department is, if you were to break it up, right, we're a logistics company, we move freight, we have trucks, we do that whole thing. But our supply chain solutions department is actually more focused on the intelligence, more focused, more data-driven. So our department came about with the idea that data helps make decisions, helps either confirm gut decisions a lot of times, or helps persuade a decision to go one way or the other when there's really no gut instinct. And so our SCS department works hard on that in terms of developing solutions to problems, and then taking it a step further and actually building out the execution and executing on those steps. So it's not just a consulting firm where we give you a blueprint and we walk away. We actually participate in the execution or bring the other parties to the table that are required to execute. If you think about, material handlers and buildings being set up properly. Mm-hmm. And so that's really what ARC's SCS is. It covers, we put together we put together buildings before in terms of bringing glass in from all over the world and rigging it and all sorts of stuff, to helping people have their organizations run better by reworking internal warehouses, closing down locations, opening up locations, and that sort of stuff. So it's kind of all over the map. But the whole goal is to help an organization, help a customer run better, run more efficient long term. So that's really what the ARC supply chain services, supply chain solutions goal is, to help your organization run better, to realize the vision that you have for the future for your organization.
Yeah, that's great. And if you guys check out our website, arctransportation.com, we do have some case studies up on some of the projects that we've done in the past. Andrew mentioned we had about 40 ocean containers coming in from overseas full of building material that we set up warehousing for and rigging, getting all the material off, and then we would load that, bring it to the job site as they needed it to work with the general contractors. We've done specific trade show projects where we warehouse certain brand assets and find space for them and then move them in and out of shows as needed. We've done full-scale LTL, where we take a look at entire LTL movement within an organization and put all the numbers and data to it to find out where they can save money, where they can get better service. So there are really endless opportunities. And that's one of the things, like we mentioned in the beginning of this video, why we love logistics, because there are unique problems everywhere. And we really love to help people solve those problems.
Absolutely, Matt. Absolutely.
All right. This leads us to our last section, Andrew, the Did You Know section. February.
All right, Matt, teach me something.
All right, I got something good today, because it's been Valentine's Day 2 weeks ago, and around the house the kids talk about Valentine's Day. We know it's candy and flowers and stuff like that, but I wanted to do a little look into Valentine and Saint Valentine, to be specific. So I found out that in 270 AD, Rome was facing battles and civil uprising, and it seemed like the men were not jumping to join the army very quickly. So they found that the men didn't want to leave their families and their loved ones. Mm-hmm. So actually, it was Emperor Claudius II. He banned weddings and engagements, so no one could get married. Yeah, and so basically there were two. So there were two priests. One of them, Saint Valentine, or Valentine at the time, and Marius. They disobeyed the decree and they secretly performed marriage ceremonies. So that's where the Saint Valentine comes from. He was caught later on February 14th, and he was imprisoned and eventually put to death. And apparently, as the legend goes, he was falling in love with someone, and he wrote his last letter said, "From your Valentine." So that is where we get the "From your Valentine" segment on Valentine's Day.
Excellent. Yeah, that's awesome. I didn't know that. I will retell that story.
There you go. History teaches us.
So the last thing before we end it, I got a special announcement to everybody. We welcomed a few new little ARC-nauts to the ARC family, and one of the proud parents is actually with us today. Matt, you had a couple weeks now.
Yeah.
You had I'll let you tell, a little baby girl, right?
Yeah, we had our third baby girl. So I'm getting heavily outnumbered at the house, but very thankful.
Excellent.
She's doing well. Mom's doing well. So yeah, very, very thankful to have a little baby girl around.
That's excellent. We love growing families at ARC. We love just people living life, doing what they want to do and doing it well. So we're super happy to welcome your new baby girl and one of our operation guys, John. They started their family with their first baby boy. So super happy to welcome them. If any of you guys talk to them on the phone, be sure to congratulate them. Let them know that give them a war story about being a parent or something like that. They'd appreciate it, I'm sure. So
hey everyone, that wraps up our February update. Thank you so much for watching. We really appreciate it. If you have any needs in shipping logistics, feel free to reach out. We're always happy to help.
Thanks everyone. Hope you have a great rest of the week, and look forward to talking to you next month.
Take care.
Take care.